tell you what, I'm going to pass these two to you all.
Okay.
Keep one for myself. And then here are those for you all. Okay, let me make sure I kept one for myself. All right, we were having such a good time. We took an extra 15 minutes. Is everybody, who's that? Dr. Mark, oh, he's, okay. Okay, we will call Community Relations Committee meeting to order at 6:30. So welcome, everyone. Roll call. Ms. Parker? Sorry, I have last year's list.
Ms. Kinzer.
Ms. Kinzer? Ms. Martin? Here. Mr. Pennings? Mr. Moore? Here. I'm sorry. Mr. Adkins? Here. Mr. Bates? Here. Mr. Beaver?
Here.
I'm here. Ms. Morency?
Here.
Mr. Dudley?
Here.
Okay. Everyone is in attendance. We have a short, quick agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion. Second.
All right, motion by Mr. Bates and a second by Mr. Moore. Okay, and everyone has a copy of the minutes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Can we vote on the adoption of the agenda? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. I hope everyone's glanced at the short minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
Second.
All right, approved by Mr. Beaver, second by Mr. Dudley. All right, all in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that passes. Okay. Our meeting will be quick. First item is just to look back at the social we had recently, and I'd love to get input whether we want to make that an annual event where we did some relationship building and said thank you to our county commissioners. I'd love to get feedback of anything anyone would recommend that we do differently, and do we want to do that again? Any comments? Feedback? Mr. Moore?
All right. Yeah, Ms. Powers, I just want to say I really appreciated the social we did have. I thought that was an excellent event, and I appreciate you spearheading that event and putting it together. I think it came off wonderfully, and I think it was an excellent opportunity for us to do exactly what our mission was on that, which was to bridge some gaps with the county commission and really have a nice family, a community event, which I think was a really fun time, and I know I had a good time. So, and we did bring a trophy home. We don't want anybody to forget that as well. But I just wanted to say thank you to you for helping really put that together. I know you did quite a bit of work to do that. I know you would say you didn't, but you did put a lot of work into that. So, but thank you very much. And I would be happy to see something similar to that next year as well.
Good deal. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Anybody else? Mr. Bates?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I would echo Mr. Moore's statements. I think it was a great event, a great team-building event. My only thoughts were, do we want to change the competition next year, and that way there's no chance they can ever get their trophy back? Or No,
I originally
no, I'm just
proposed
kidding.
basketball, and that was shot down. We can go back to the more.
No, I think it'd be a great idea of having the annual cornhole tournament. I think that'd be a really a great thing where maybe the trophy can get passed back and forth. Maybe we'll hold on to it many more years, though. So.
Okay, Mr. Pennings.
Yeah, I had one complaint from the county commissioner. They said Dr. Marzak wasn't really part of the school board, but we have adopted him, so we said yes, he is. But we beat Mr. Shackelford this year, so maybe we can beat somebody else next year. Who knows?
And the only reason I participate is because Mayor Norman was participating.
That's right, sir. Otherwise, you would have been, yeah, right.
Anyone else? Well, I think it was a good time. I think everyone pulled together. We pulled it off, and I think it was a good time had by all. So sounds like we're getting more positives than negatives, so we will hopefully aim to make it an annual event. I would love if anybody, I think community relations is maybe kind of a category of its own. Now that our school system is operating quite efficiently, and I think it's been a great 2 years of community buildings. I'm thrilled about our new members. I just have a lot of optimism moving forward. I have some thoughts about the direction I would like to see community relations go. I will likely be handing it off as chairman, but I would love to maybe leave a list of goals. I feel like we tried something new in relationship building with the county commission, and I think we proposed it as more of a family event, a social event, and we had a good response. And I might propose that community relations kind of expand that thought to the community. When I first got on the board, we talked a lot about how everyone would go to different schools and have meetings and no one would attend. But maybe if we made it more of a social opportunity where we participated in some activity with the community and gave an opportunity to relationship build and improve ourselves open. I did talk to Mr. Breeden about his zone concept, and it may be that we could offer some type of venue in a zone concept, so we weren't trying to go to every school, but we could maybe do it in zones, which would give us 3 opportunities to bring people in. So that is something that I might propose, but I would love to make a list of goals for the next year if anyone has any input. But I think this committee has done a lot of good work. When Ms. Parker was chairman, I know we took on the website and some other things of gravity, but I feel like currently our central office is tending to the business, and we could maybe provide more of the strictly community relations side. So any feedback? Mr. Dudley.
Thank you. Well, I too believe our outing with the commissioners was great. It helps us to know and understand the commissioner's side of things, and then also it gives us opportunity to explain our side in some things. But you know, for the most part, we didn't discuss school and county business. This was an issue or a deal for us just to have a meal and a gathering social event without a lot of pressure. So I too would like for us to continue that. But with the growth the county is experiencing, I think the committee needs to, I see opportunities throughout the year for us to have some sessions to explain to the public and to our students what we have planned for years to come. You know, we're trying to be proactive and look ahead and not have to be reactive in our planning, and so I think there's going to be opportunities for us to explain what we're doing to our constituents because they're not going to know. So many of them don't come to the meetings, and so many of them don't have an opportunity to really know what we've got planned. There's going to be some drastic changes, especially in the areas where we have the growth, but also we don't want the other areas of the county to feel neglected. Dr. Marzak has got things going on all over the county, and so we need to continue explaining to the public you know, what we're planning for their section of the county. And so I think we just need to look and find opportunities for us to better inform the community.
Thank you. Anybody else with any thoughts on where we head? Okay, well, I have, we'll put this out there for whoever takes over community relations, and I think we may have a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Beaver. Thank you, Mr. Dudley. All in favor of? All opposed? All right, and that passes at, under 10 minutes. Way to go.
All right, if no objections, we'll just go right into policy. In the interest of time, I will just let the record reflect that all members are present. The first item is to adopt the agenda, and I did have one addition to the agenda that I would like to add, an E, which is to consider the ACT resolution. Dr. Marzak had emailed that out, I think yesterday, and we found out that in order to get that before the legislature, we have a deadline of September 22nd. So we actually have our full board meeting that night, and so we would actually need to act on that before then. So if we do have a specially called meeting in the future, we may need to add that if we are supportive of this particular resolution. Are there any other additions or changes to the agenda? All right, we have a motion to approve as amended. Do we have a second? Second from Mr. Pennings. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed? All right, we have an agenda. Our next item is the minutes from the last meeting. Everyone should have had a chance to look at those. If there are any additions or deletions, please speak up at this time. If not, do we have a motion to approve those minutes? We have a motion from Mr. Beaver. Do we have a second? Second from Mr. Pennings. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. Our first item under other business is our TSBA recommendations, and I'm going to turn that over to Ms. Alexander and let her speak on those.
The first one is 4.210, which is credit recovery. The reason for the edit, this is basically a new model policy, and it complies with the changes. The state board did make a change to policy 2.103. There's a new requirement now that boards shall have a policy on credit recovery that addresses the admission, removal, instruction, content, curriculum, and grades. Currently, we don't have a policy, and so I'm recommending that we do adopt the TSBA model policy for those requirements. We can.
Let's go ahead and consider all of TSBA's, if that's all right.
Can we go on to the second one
Yes,
for the
please.
graduation? 4.706, graduation requirements. You actually have two policies to look at. One is the current Murray County policy. The other is the TSBA policy. The policy was updated to comply with two updates in the law. The first requires students to take the civics test, and then the second change reflects changes regarding students taking the ACT or SAT in 11th grade, and it removes, there used to be a requirement of 8th and 10th grade, and that has been removed.
Do we have any discussion on that particular policy? All right, we'll move on to the third.
Policy 4.707, graduation activities. There was language added to the current Murray County Public Schools policy. Again, State Board Policy 2.103, it now requires boards to put in policy students who voluntarily complete 10 hours of community service each semester are now to be recognized at the graduation ceremony. So this language was just added to our policy so that we meet the requirements of the law.
Any discussion on that policy? Mr. Bates?
And so now principals are going to be required, if one of the students had completed 10 hours of community service, they're supposed to just have a special recognition for that?
Yes.
And if we adopt this policy, then do you all, I guess, then disseminate that out to the principals so that they know
Yes.
the new requirement? Okay. And I think this is a great idea. I think this is, though, an example of the state dictating to the local boards exactly what to put in our policies. And that is an ongoing frustration of mine, that sometimes I kind of feel like, why don't you all just write all the policies and just hand it to us? Because that's seems to be what to happen. Again, it's a good idea, but it just seems to be micromanaging on the state level. So that's just, I want to make that comment.
Duly noted. Any other discussion on that one? If not, we'll move on to the next policy.
Policy 4.800 is testing. You again have two policies to look at, the current Maury County Public Schools policy and the TSBA policy. The policy was updated to reflect the change in the ability for parents to access student questions and answers. And because of Public Chapter 844, it's now requiring districts to publicly disseminate this information of how parents can do that. We plan to put that on our website, and so I've highlighted on the TSBA policy in that 6-step procedure how we're going to do that.
Do we have any discussion on that particular policy? Seeing none, we do have a motion. Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve all of the TSBA recommendations. So our Maury County policy that we do have in some of those instances will be replaced with the TSBA recommendations. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed? All right, we've approved the TSBA recommendations. The next section is for staff recommendations, and I know the first item, Ms. Staton, I think, wanted to speak on that one. Is that right?
Not necessarily, but I can.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
This policy is for the use of glucagon and diazepam gel in the schools. Basically, if we don't have a full-time nurse in every school, we have to have this policy in place in case diazepam has to be used. It is an anti-seizure medication, and so we don't have this policy in place, and we don't have a nurse at all of our schools full-time. So that's why we recommend it.
Do we have any questions regarding the policy that's been recommended? This is also a TSBA policy. We just had a gap in our policy manual where we didn't have a policy on this specific topic. So we're checking one more box off. Seeing no discussion, do we have a motion to approve that policy? We have a motion. Do we have a second? And second from Mr. Moore. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed? All right, we have a new policy to be posted. The next policy is policy 6.202, homeschools, and I know that Dr. Woodard wanted to speak on that one, so I'll turn the floor over to him.
Good evening, distinguished board members. I have a brief presentation I'd like to share with you, and this is more for informational purposes so that we can begin to make some decisions around an issue that I believe is a growing concern for the county. First off, with regard to homeschools, what we're starting to notice is that we're getting a lot of late applications. State law indicates that a parent must declare their intent to homeschool before the first day of school. And so what we're starting to see are a lot of late applications. Second thing, we're starting to see parents also withdraw their kids mid-year, which is also an issue. And also, we see a loss of ADM, BEP dollars due to that. In addition to that, this is having a negative impact on our enrollment, of course, to the tune of about 433 students last year who were pulled out mid-year or at some point that we lost to home schools. Current enrollment for the county right now sits at about 12,696 students. But again, if we keep this process, if this continues to happen, we're going to lose students. Right now, if you look at the per pupil expenditure and multiply that times 433 students, you can see that it's a revenue loss of about $2.5 million. So again, it's something that we need to look at and take seriously. Here's what the state law says about homeschool and the requirements. So first, let me say that we're not trying to prohibit homeschool parents from doing this. We want to make sure that they're duly qualified and that there's communication between Murray County with our director and or his designee, which would be myself. And of course, we want to make sure that we're on the same page about this before parents walk and leave. But we also want to make sure that homeschool parents are duly qualified. They must have a high school diploma and or GED or higher educational experience. They must provide to us the names of the kids that they're going to be homeschooling. They must provide the ages and, of course, the grade level of the children, in addition to a copy of a proposed curriculum. And many times we're receiving applications that don't have any of that, and they've already pulled the child, and they're gone, and we never see them again. And
Yeah.
so,
What we're seeing is, so there's a difference between a parent that wants to homeschool their child and a parent that gets upset over a decision the school's made that they don't like, and they say, that's it, I'm gone, I'm homeschooling my child. And so what we're wanting to do, what Dr. Woodard's wanting to do, is wanting to make sure that parents who truly want to homeschool their children get what they need and have what they need in order to properly homeschool, and also us to alleviate, well, I'm gone, because I think my kid should be able to do this, and you won't let them do it, so I'm going to homeschool them fine. Because what we tend to find out is those children are quick returners to the system because their parents are not, they really don't want to homeschool their children, but they want to make a statement, and then they come back and their learning has regressed, and they're actually worse off than when they left us.
absolutely. Moving on, here's what the withdrawal law says. It says that a parent or guardian with any good and substantial reason as determined by the parent or other person having legal custody of a child, and here's the key words, and agreed to by the respective local board of education may withdraw the child. And so that is not always happening. Sometimes we don't know, and there's been no agreement. And so sometimes they just pull their kids, they're gone, and of course we're losing $80 because of that. Let's look at root causes. Here's what we have, I've studied this issue now for about 6 weeks, and here's what we've identified in terms of root causes. One is someone is mistrust of the public ed system, and so we're working hard to increase trust. Our director's doing a great job with that. Sometimes it's personal preference. They just prefer to homeschool their kids, and they have that right. Some of it is religious preference. They prefer to infuse religion into the schooling, and so they have the right to do so. Some of this is also what Chris mentioned, which is dissatisfaction with the school and or the school leadership. Some of this also is due to safety perceptions. They believe that some of the schools are not safe, and so they want to pull their kids. But of course, the ones that we want to stop are the escape route. Sometimes when kids commit offenses that require them to come to DHA, you know, we had one recently at a local school where a student was in possession of an illegal substance. As opposed to coming to DHA, the parent decided to try to pull the kid and go to homeschool. And so this is becoming an escape route. They will not report to DHA, which is Discipline Hearing Authority, or if the kid is going to be suspended for an offense, if they know that the child will be suspended, they will pull out and go to homeschool, or if it leads to an expulsion, or in some cases, if there are truancy issues, as opposed to go to the courts, they will seek to escape through homeschool. Here's some common statements that we get. I get a lot of homeschool parents calling me after they pull their kids. I think some of this you will find hilarious, but here we go. Here's the first one. My child has been withdrawn. Now what do I do? These are phone calls that I get. Next one. What time will they come to my house and teach my kids? I get these calls, literally. This is a situation where a homeschool parent has gotten homeschool confused with homebound, and they've already pulled the kid. Another one. Does Murray County Public Schools provide learning materials because I don't have internet access? Oh, something happened there. Here we go. Next question. What do you teach a fifth grader? I also get questions like, what textbook should I buy? They call about the textbooks. Can I borrow the textbooks from my child's former school? We get calls about, we've moved and now I can't find my high school diploma. Remember that having a high school diploma is a part of the process to actually homeschool your child. Can my neighbor or next of kin be the teacher since I have to work? My children are not being challenged, so we're pulling them out. Another one, they're teaching Islam in that school, so I'm pulling my kids out. My child has anxiety issues, migraines, allergies, etc., from being in school. Those are just some of the kinds of phone calls that we receive once some of the homeschool parents have actually pulled their kids. So we're seeing a myriad of things. Some of the local umbrella schools are as follows: Home Life Academy in Jackson, Gateway Christian, Choice Academy in Hohenwald, Heritage Covenant, which is in Lobelville, and the Farm School, which is in Summertown. So I have a couple of handouts for you, and I don't want to prolong tonight's meeting. I know that you have a lot of business to discuss. I want to ask our wonderful director if he'd help me pass these out. Sure. Score some brownie points. In this packet that you guys are going to receive, it has kind of a proposal, something that I'm proposing to you to add to the current policy that we have in Murray County. In addition to that, most of this packet are just homeschool laws or compulsory attendance laws for your reference, and/or laws on reasons why a child can be excused from the compulsory attendance law, and/or reasons why a kid can be withdrawn from a public institution. So all those laws are in there just for your information. If you turn to page 2 in this packet, page 2 is the document that we've created. Again, we're looking at this as a procedural item. We're not saying that we want to stop homeschool parents from opting in that right or having that right. We're saying that we want to be informed and duly informed. So what should happen is that a parent will turn in an intent to homeschool form, which they download from the state website. Once we get that, it should include all the information that we mentioned earlier, which is the parent has proof of their high school diploma and/or GED. It should include a curriculum, and again, we hardly ever see curriculum. Parents just send the application. Most times we see proof of a GED or high school diploma. We hardly ever see any proof of curriculum. But again, in many instances, they're already gone. They've already pulled their kids, but they're sending the paperwork. So again, trying to get them back has been difficult. So we're trying to put a stopgap in place so that we have some control of what's happening. Again, once we have the appropriate materials in the homeschool form, what we want to see is that these forms are either in one of the 4 or 5 categories. One, it's approved, which means that the applicant meets all the requirements as outlined in the law. Or 2, it's a continuity approval. What we mean by continuity is that we have some parents who are just applying year to year. It's just a renewal. Their kids have never been in public schools, and they just want to continue to homeschool their kids, and they're just letting us know. Sometimes they do let us know after the deadline, which means if you notify us after the deadline, you must now abide by compulsory attendance. But in the case for a child that has never been publicly schooled, we want to go ahead and give them the fast track to continue to go if everything is approved and everything is right. The third category is alternate placement requests. This is where an applicant really is maybe upset about the current conditions in the school, and they want to withdraw to go to homeschool, but maybe by offering them an administrative transfer to another school in our county, we can satisfy or resolve an issue. And so we'll put some of those applications in that category. Sometimes it means they won't have to go or withdraw because they just really wanted an alternate placement, but they thought that option wasn't available. So we're saying now through this process, we can make that available to parents. The next category is on hold. If we have applicants who partially meet the criteria and not the full criteria, we just have to put them in a holding file. That's what we currently do now. If they don't meet all the criteria, we just have the application on hold. But again, in many cases, they've already pulled the kid and they're gone. And so we don't get a follow-up from that parent sometimes. And the last category will be that there is just an outright denial. If the parent did not meet the qualifications and criteria based upon the law, then it would be an outright denial, by which we'd have to pursue, go after the parents for truancy if they don't bring their kids to public school. And so those are the categories that we want to put in place. We think that this form would help streamline this process because we don't have a process in place now. Someone needs to be watching this, and so our director has kind of delegated that task to me. Thank you. And so I will be watching some of this and making sure that the best interest of Murray County schools is represented. So again, that is what this form is, and again, this is mostly for informational purposes. Could I answer any questions at this time regarding homeschools? Any issues or concerns?
My question, 433 is what you said we were at for
Last year.
Last year?
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. So that's a large number.
Yes.
At what point do we know that, you said the child has been pooled? So at this point, you just know the child's not coming back to school, their attendance is gone, they're absent several days in a row, you figure out they're not coming back. At what point do you know that they have enlisted in one of those umbrella school systems?
Okay.
That are the options? So you just know that they're not here. Are you given anything from those umbrella schools to say they are definitely with us, or you just assume that they're there? Or
We are. If they apply to an umbrella school, we get information.
Okay.
They will contact us and get information, request grades, or request things from us. So we're notified by the umbrella schools. We're not notified when the parent opts to just keep the child at home. And so that, in my opinion, is what is kind of affecting the county. It's detrimental to the county.
Okay.
Is when parents
So
pull
if
their
they
kids.
don't go to the umbrella school, they're just
Right.
at home deciding to do this on their own under no supervision of
Right.
it, and you haven't gotten anything because you don't know nothing?
Right,
Know nothing,
right.
as crazy as that sounds. Okay.
Yes. That is
Thank you.
happening. Yes. Any other questions regarding homeschools that I could answer?
Thank you. I've got one. A parent comes in and says, if my child continues having to attend school A, if that's what the school system says, I'm going to pull the child and homeschool it. The option is given, we will look and see if there's another school that your child can attend to try and work it out, school B or C. Problem being, school B and C are to full capacity. I think it's unfair to allow that child to attend one of those and knock somebody else out of the school they're zoned for. So what's our options there?
Again, typically this happens mid-year, so by then, most of the seats things are pretty settled. In our language, we stipulate that they will be given that choice if a seat is available. So we put that in the language of this document, if a seat is available. But what we're trying to do is find a happy medium so that we don't lose as many constituents from our county. Right now, we're losing customers. And that's the way I look at this from a business perspective. Right now, people are voting with their feet and they're walking away. And so if we don't put something in place, we'll continue to lose our constituents. And so we think that by providing a happy medium here, by providing something, some type of options, we can keep some of our residents in our county. And again, this does not even count the number of kids that are attending private schools in our county. That's a whole nother conversation.
But what process have we gone through to make sure that the parent has a legitimate complaint to begin with?
That's what we're putting in place now. Yes, sir. Do you want
Tell them what you've been doing, what kind of work with parents. Give an example of some cases.
We've had some cases where parents have contacted the pupil services department, and they've, every time they call in, they'll request the homeschool information, and I'll ask them to come in and see me and ask, can we talk? And in 3 or 4 of those cases, we've been able to resolve an issue between a parent and a school principal, and they'll decide to stay. We've been able to keep some people. Again, we won't make everyone happy. We're not in that business. But I will say that we've been able to find a happy medium in some cases that will keep some of our constituents in the county. So we're beginning to have more dialogue with principals about this, and we're having some, dialogue with our staff members around providing, customer service to parents. And also, Dr. Marzak is providing more options to make the schools attractive.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, I mean, I certainly want us to try and resolve any issue with any parents we have if it is a true legitimate concern. But some of them throw up some frivolous things and I don't think are true legitimate concerns. Some of them say, well, my child has to show up at school at 8 o'clock and they don't get up till 10:30. So I just want us to make sure it's a true legitimate concern before we try and cater to them.
Yeah, and Mr. Dudley, Dr. Woodard and I have had a couple of extensive conversations around this. one of the things that I've enjoyed since he's gotten here is he's not kind of sitting back and say, well, let me take 6 months to try to figure out what's going on. He's hit the ground running and saying, Doc, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? So he's coming with a plethora of ideas to where we're really trying to become more customer service oriented in Murray County Public Schools. I want to say for years, part of our problem as a public school system is we felt like we were the only game in town, and so we didn't have to be customer service oriented, because you know what, if you don't like it, tough, where else are you going to go? But as time has passed and as schools have evolved, and charter schools and private schools and home schools, public schools are no longer the only games in town, and parents have options. And so one of the things that I've appreciated about Dr. Woodard is, with his customer service mindset, he's coming with solutions to create us to be a more customer service oriented school system. I thought it was a great idea where he said, you know, Doc, is it okay if we can look at an alternate school placement? Another place where, you know, maybe there's some personality conflicts and that child would maybe have a more successful career. And I thought that was a great option. You know, if you don't like the steak, you're not a problem. How'd you like me to bring you some chicken? So it's kind of like providing options versus them getting up and taking their business somewhere else and walking out the door. So he's come in with some fresh ideas, and I've enjoyed what he's had so far, and I think we're going to get some traction. If you follow him on Twitter, he has a propensity for putting up there another satisfied customer, and they're wearing a pair of Grow Murray sunglasses, and he's pointing them out. And they're smiling when they take the picture. So he's coming with some good ideas. It really is. But Mr. Dudley, good questions, sir. Good questions.
Any other questions?
Oh, yes. A couple of things. I really like the idea of trying to kind of close the gap, which I'm looking through a trophy at you. A really nice trophy, by the way. I like the idea of trying to make sure, because I understand that there are some reactionary times where a parent's going to pull a student out. And I can definitely see where there's some gaps here in the student's interest where the parent was not ready for what they've just decided to do. And they've already decided to do it, and they've already done it. And that I like. What I get very uncomfortable with is when we start talking about lost revenue, because that's not the driving force here. It's
Right.
the impact on these children.
Right.
And I understand as a school system, you guys kind of have to look at that number, but that makes me very uneasy when we start talking about these students in terms of revenue lost, because that's just not what we're here for. But I do like that there are some things here. I guess what concerns me on this, and if you could kind of walk me through this, two things. One, I know there's quite a few students, and in the past they haven't given you this information. I don't think they've really haven't been formally asked for it in some ways, have they? Or have they been asked for all this information?
They have been.
Okay. So kind of walk me through how many of the ones that would average come out a year, or do you plan to reject, or do you think you're going to have to reject because they cannot provide it? And then on top of that, kind of walk me through that process. How would that go if you deny someone what they've already pulled the student out? They turn in an incomplete application, and you, as the school system, decide, we're going to deny this. What are the steps after that? I mean, what kind of action are we taking, and how far are we going to take that to try to, I guess, prove our point?
At that point, you're looking at a person who is now in violation of the compulsory attendance law. So if you've not declared your intent to homeschool your child by the first day of school, you're now under the compulsory attendance law. Okay? And so, again, what we're seeing is all these applications are coming in after that date, or they're upset with the school, and then they'll pull their kid after that date, but they've already missed the deadline to notify the director that they're going to homeschool their kids. Okay? Now, if you look at the withdrawal law says that we can't prohibit them from withdrawing, but there also has to be board agreement, which is where you all come in. So this process now creates some form of agreement between the parent and the LEA so that we're on the same page about the best interest of the kid. But they will fall under the compulsory attendance law, and we'd have to go after them for truancy if they refuse to bring the kids back, if they don't meet the criteria under the homeschool law to actually be the parent teacher at home.
Okay.
And another thing we have to be cognizant about is a dropout rate. If that child withdraws and they're not enrolled in an acceptable homeschool environment, and we don't know that, then it negatively impacts our dropout rate,
Correct.
which is monitored by the State Department of Education,
That's correct.
which then can move us into corrective action. If we have too many students that drop out and they don't report to us where they are at their next school or which homeschool that they're being seen at. So not only is it an impact financially, it also impacts our status with the State Department.
Okay. But I guess to get back to the question, though, I mean, how many of these do we expect to start having to deny? And again, what actions, or I guess more importantly, what cost are we looking at? If we start following up on more of these and we start denying these, I mean, that's not something, are you going to have to, take in charge of? How much time, effort, and money is this going to take to start pursuing this?
In terms of revenue, I couldn't answer that. I'm not sure how much revenue it would take to pursue it. I can tell you that this year, we're at about 161 applications and growing. Right now, my office is getting about 17 to 18 applications per week. And so we'll quickly reach that number before the end of school. So we're trying to, put a stopgap in place and potentially, work through issues so we don't have as many. And again, we're not against homeschools. We want to make sure that we have qualified parents who do this, who accept this option. And so, we want to make sure that we don't have people who are not qualified pulling their kids out of our schools because, as Dr. Marzak said, they're going to come back and then they're behind. The other issue with that is that state law says that if a child is 6 months to a year behind, then of course the director then has the right to mandate that they come back to school. So if they're being homeschooled but they're not being successful, when we give them those assessments when they come back and they're not on grade level, then the director can mandate by law that they come back to public school. So we do have some teeth here, but we're getting to the point now where we want to make sure that we're really watching and monitoring this.
Well, to go with that, I know, I guess since we're on the front end of this, were this to pass, I would definitely be interested in following up and seeing how this procedurally actually plays out as we do it, if it were to pass. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Okay. Well, Dr. Woodard, I was first going to say, outstanding presentation. I really loved it. It's very informative, and I really appreciate you putting the time in and being able to lay this out to us, and that was really great. And also love the tweets. I see some of the tweets going out, and I think you all and your office is doing a great job, and so I want to commend you for that. As far as, so what we're here for tonight, just from a procedural standpoint, I see you all have made this proposed procedure, but do you all need our approval of this, or is this something you all can do in-house as just an internal procedure? Or do you all need some assistance from us in order to help support you by policy? I see that I think we've got a current policy in place. I didn't know if there's going to be some proposed changes to that policy, so that was just kind of a procedural question that I had first. But are we, I guess, just approving their procedure, or are you all asking us to make changes to policy?
We're just asking you all to add the procedure to the policy. Let's get the procedure inside of our policy.
Okay. And so we can come back to that in a moment, I guess, just how we're going to do that procedurally. But and I was curious, so how does, like, if you do have a parent that just up in the middle of the year says, I'm going to start homeschooling, how does that affect our attendance numbers? Is there some point when that they go off the books and it doesn't affect us, like they're being absentee at some point, or how does that work?
Eventually, it affects our ADM, our average daily membership.
Okay.
So it does impact us there, which again, not to make this about revenue, but it is,
Right.
It becomes a revenue issue.
Well, and I see and I certainly respect Mr. Moore's viewpoint. I mean, and I guess we never want to look at a child and dollar signs, but
Absolutely.
I do think it is important for us to look at the revenue because at the end of the day, if you've got a teacher in that classroom and halfway through the year, a child gets yanked out and we lose that revenue, that affects everybody in that classroom. Mm-hmm. And so it's the effect, the harm to the other students that I'm concerned about, the loss of that revenue, the loss of resources to all the kids at that particular school. So that is something that is a real concern. And I think we all, at the end of the day, our number one concern, which sets us apart as a public school system. Our number one concern is the best interest of that child, that if they're not in a classroom, they may not be getting the education that they need to be, ready for life. That's our vision for the entire county. And so our purpose, I think is a good purpose as a public county school system, is that we've got everybody's interest at heart to make sure they get a good education. So,
Mr. Chairman, it's standard practice that once a student is absent for 10 consecutive days, especially if we don't hear from the family, we automatically withdraw that student and roll back to the first day they were out. Because this also impacts us in a second way. As people may or may not have known, the state is currently going to be monitoring absenteeism as part of a culture factor of schools. If you saw today the scorecard that I sent home, we're now going to start tracking absenteeism and chronic absenteeism in our current school system. And Dr. Woodard is currently taking steps to increase attendance in schools and reduce chronic absenteeism, kids that are absent consistently for 10 days or more throughout the course of the school year. So those are things we're currently working on because we're going to be held accountable for having high attendance and low chronic absenteeism.
And I think, and I'm kind of understanding this, if they're going through the budget process, but I think maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as how the state formula is, as far as how they send money, it's not based upon enrollment. It's based upon this average daily attendance. And so you can end up where you have a classroom where you're required, because of ratios, I guess, to have certain resources, but if the children are not attending class, you lose the revenue, even though you still have to probably provide the same services. So it's a real, dynamic that really affects us and affects, I think, that all those other children in the classroom.
Well, I think it's a good idea what you're doing, because if we're having 433 children last year apply for homeschooling, we need to find out why. So what you're doing is a good service for the school system, because customer service is what we do.
Yeah.
We educate our children. And finding out why they want to homeschool or why they want to pull their children, I think, is probably the most important aspect of your job, and trying to correct whatever issues we have.
Thank you.
Yes, I just want to find out, how long a process does this take from the time you say the child is missing school to the time he is denied or applied for the homeschool? How long of a process is this? How many days?
What we've put in this packet is that we're asking asking for 3 to 5 business days to respond back to the parent. We felt like that was reasonable. However, the parent still has to abide by the compulsory attendance law until the decision is made, until we reach the agreement.
So we have to keep the kid in the school?
Yes, sir. By law, the kid is supposed to remain in school until the process has been completed. And again, that's what one of the issues that we're seeing is that parents will submit the application and pull the child also. And so then we have to go after them, or, so it's a big challenge.
So we are taking truancy actions if they are not bringing the child back to the school?
Yes, we're going to begin truancy action, yes. Yes, sir.
That was my question. After the 10 consecutive days, we processed the withdrawal. And then at that point, they're going to truancy court, you're going after.
Yes, a petition will be filed for truancy, yes, ma'am.
Okay. I also commend you for being proactive, and I didn't take it as a dollar amount. I commend Dr. Marzak for bringing the other statistics to us. At the end of the line, bottom line period is there's a lot of pies, a lot of slices to this pie, and one ripple in the pond is going to affect a lot of things. So, that number is just huge to me. So I think we should just really be doing as much as we can to understand that people do have choices. People do have choices, and we want them to know that, we have the best opportunity here, and we want them to stay. So.
When Dr. McQueen stated that during the year 2014-15, the year before I got here, our chronic absenteeism rate was 30%, that was the red flag that threw up that we needed to do things differently. It got better last year, and I think with Dr. Woodard here, it's going to continue to get better from here.
And I appreciate the email, too, you
you
sent out that showed us the things that you're talking about. The pulse and that absenteeism is a big deal, BIG. So I appreciate those things, too, because we maybe need to make parents a little bit more aware and commend us when we're doing good and let us know when we're doing wrong.
Absolutely.
And parental involvement in attendance is this year's focus for the Murray Alliance. October 25th, we're tentatively going to have an event. It's going to be our next community forum, and it's going to be around parental involvement in attendance and how attendance plays a factor in helping your children be successful with the keys of college and career readiness. If they're not in school, they're not learning how to read. They're not learning how to do math. They're not able to do well on the ACT. You have to have your children in school. So that's the critical thing.
I just have a quick comment question. Once you approve someone, and I do like the idea that they're going to be homeschooled by somebody approved, because I think in the past sometimes that hasn't happened. But once they're off of our roll, is there anybody checking to see that these things are happening? Or we have no responsibility beyond that, which I understand if we don't. But my concern is is about the student and whether they are actually getting. So you're saying that you're going to be much more strenuous in making sure that whoever is their homeschool teacher is prepared and ready to do it and following through.
The key is having qualified parents who are really qualified to do the work. Once they have left our system, though, we really don't have much of a, there's very little we can do unless they come back to our system. When they come back to our system, then we have to give an assessment to find out if they're on grade level or not. This becomes a little more complicated in high school because, that assessment dictates whether or not we give kids credit. Now we're talking about credit. If a parent is at home teaching something, but then we're going to award credit, we're the accredited institution. And so now if we award credit for something and the kid really isn't at the skill level, you jeopardize your accreditation. So it gets really complicated.
And it would be nice to do that, but it's just like if a child enrolls in a private school program, we don't track them once they're in the private school program. That's now the private school's responsibility. So once they entered a homeschool program, they're now the responsibility of the homeschool program. They're no longer an active participant in the public school, so we really can't track them.
And I will say the umbrella schools, have a better system, I think, in place that we've seen for tracking where kids are. And they've done a really good job about contacting us than what we've seen in terms of individual parents who are pulling their kids, acting as parent-teacher at home.
Any other questions for Dr. Woodard? I guess I have one question, Dr. Woodard. We've kind of tried to make it a habit of keeping the procedural side in your hands,
Okay.
so that you have some flexibility. So that if you needed to change this to, you're getting inundated with requests and all of a sudden you can't respond within 3 to 5 days and you need to make it 5 to 7 days or whatnot. So from our actual policy, is there certain language that you want us to have included, or are you really wanting us to adopt these?
Yes, I'm asking for you all to adopt this procedure. Let's put this procedure in place. And again, it doesn't have to be tonight. If you want more time to study this issue, if you have things that you'd like me to research or come back with more numbers, or I could do that. But I'm hoping that we can get something in place so that we can begin to have a stopgap.
Mr. Wilbur?
I might suggest if I could, you don't necessarily have to approve the procedure, you just have to approve the designation of the authority to take that authority away from you guys. If you don't, theoretically, you'd have a hearing every time that the board, that Dr. Woodard decided that maybe somebody's not eligible for housing. So if you wanted to leave the procedure in the hands of the director and Dr. Woodard, you could do that, just approve the designation of authority, and then we could go from there.
Nice.
That way they could tweak the procedure as necessary.
Sounds good. Mr. Bates?
And so, Mr. Walliver, would you suggest including, I'm looking at our current homeschool, 6.202, would it be your suggestion of making some addition to that, to make that designation, to make that clear?
I don't even know that that's necessary. I think you just vote to designate the authority under this particular statute to the director's school.
So almost like just a resolution of the committee, and it would be adopted by the board?
Some action that they could go back to if it's ever challenged.
Okay.
Do we have a motion for that?
Madam Chairman, I so move.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I think Mr. Penning seconded. Any discussion? Amanda, are you pretty clear on what that motion will be? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? All right, that motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Woodard, again for being proactive on this issue and reaching out to us on this. I think there's a lot of things in policy that sometimes we don't know the ins and outs of what y'all have to do. So whatever we can do to help you, we appreciate you being proactive and bringing that to us. And thank you for coming on a late Thursday night. I know you got to get back to Nashville, so thank you for being here, though. Our next policy to be considered is policy 3.216, and that is naming of new facilities. And this policy was put on in large part because of at our last board meeting, we had some discussion with regards to a petition that is potentially going to be brought to us with regards to renaming Spring Hill Elementary. We actually don't have a policy in place for renaming schools, so I think that's something that we may want to consider, and we can use this as a starting off point. But also, as we start talking about growth in our county, obviously this naming of new facilities could again come up. So I think this is a good time for us to consider this policy and maybe get an idea of what we're looking for with regards to naming of facilities and or renaming of facilities. Any discussion? Mr. Moore?
I would agree with this. I know with what we were brought last month, and I guess also looking at the fact that we're more than likely about to be building some new schools, and I don't mean just one school, I mean several schools. In looking at the policy we do have, as you said, it doesn't cover renaming facilities. And I know we've kind of pieced together in the past some things about naming various parts of buildings and other stuff. But I think in looking at this, I think it would probably be wise of the board to probably take a pretty in-depth look at what our policy is, maybe if we want to really come up with a concise plan for how we want to handle these things moving forward before we have a new facility sitting in front of us and we're trying to figure this out on the fly as far as naming a school or even what to do on a renaming of a school. So I think this is just what's in our policy now. And I don't know the best way to handle it. If we need to, perhaps at maybe the next policy meeting, bring something back, or board members could bring some submissions or some ideas they have on refining this policy. Or if TSBA has some suggestions, maybe we could look at what they've got. Do they have a policy that covers this? I don't know if they do. But we may want to get that and include that in some discussions and kind of put together what we as a board maybe want to look at for how we want to proceed on that.
Sounds good. I believe TSBA does have a policy on naming of facilities. So we will have that as part of our, we can have that as part of our general review of the TSBA policies that are coming up. But specifically with renaming, I know there were some questions at the last board meeting as to who they should talk to and referring them to policy, but we really don't have a policy specifically on renaming. So just don't know if that's causing your staff any problem, because I think you were pretty much made the designee on that.
And what I was wanting to do is wait till tonight to decide what you guys want to do, considering we don't have a policy on renaming a facility, before we start to establish a committee to start to look at that request that came up from the board agenda for last Thursday.
Mr. Moore?
I think obviously if I did make my opinion clear on that, I think we definitely need to have something in place before we move ahead on that and have a clear idea as a board. I'm not sure if tonight's the best night to kind of hash that out on the fly, but I would definitely like to see some additional information if TSBA has a sample policy, or maybe I'll be happy to look into some more things as well myself to see if there's anything already out there that we can piggyback on.
Would you like for us to do some research and bring it back to the October?
If you want to do more research and I don't have to, that was an excellent plan. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I have designees.
Just keep passing it around.
Mr. Bates?
I was going to say, I mean, there's some very a lot of vagueness in the current policy, and maybe the TSBA, whatever suggested policy that they have, may be helpful, because the process is it starts with the process that the director shall charge a committee to consider and make recommendations for the naming. But does it really say what is the process that the director would create a committee? Is that going to be because at the very beginning of the policy, it says that's the prerogative of the board. So the board is really always it's our authority whether to name a facility or not. So it almost would seem that there would need to be some step in the process. There would have to be maybe a majority vote from the board to direct the director to then create the committee to start considering names. But right now, there's just kind of like seems like a missing part in this process that may be helpful. And then I think we also, from where I think this is a good policy discussion, is the overarching question of, should we be in the business of naming any facilities? That's, I think, a valid question that the committee ought to consider, and maybe the board of, do we want to be in that business of naming facilities? And maybe we do, but I think we ought to have some discussion on that.
And what I would like to see happen is giving us or giving myself and our designee the ability to go through the process for that and then bring it to the board for approval. And if it's something that a majority of the board likes, then it's voted on. If not, it's defeated. Then we go back to the drawing board and we start the process all over again. We come back with it, and we just keep coming back until the board approves the name. So that's one of the things that I guess through policy or through procedure, I'd like for you guys to relinquish that to us. Let us do the legwork and bring it to you and decide, no, do you like the name? And if you like the name, cool. If you don't, we'll come back with another one.
Mr. Pennings?
This whole policy, I don't like at all. I mean, yes, you should form a committee and everything, but the public pays for the school. And in here, you can't even get any public input because no publicity shall be given to the recommendation. So you can't even ask the public, hey, what do you think? Well, I think if we're thinking of a new policy, we need to put in there exactly how we're going to do it and make sure we involve the public.
Because one of the things that I could see is when we establish a committee, maybe the committee says, well, let's see what the public thinks. And we kind of do with the logo. We kind of launch a digital suggestion box where we start to get input from the community, and you have to be a member of the community. You have to put your address in there, or you have to put the school that you attend and your name. Maybe that's something the committee decides that we want to move forward with versus taking that on ourselves. So that's something that we could do as well.
I was just going to say, I think there is some, inclusiveness in the current policy. It does say the committee shall be comprised of student, teacher, and administrative representatives. Other representatives of the communities may serve on the committee as deemed appropriate by the director. So the director looks like he has the final call as who would be on that committee. But
I'd like to see this whole policy written, and I love Dr. Marzak and I respect him. And I don't think we should leave it in the director's hands whether he wants to get the public involved or not. That's our job to say whether we want to get the public involved or whether we don't want to get the public involved. Why put the weight of that whole thing on his shoulders? He's got enough to do.
That's why you hired me.
Do we want to defer this particular policy to October and have some further discussion?
I'd make a motion to table this policy until we rewrite it.
With the director doing the research.
With the director doing the research or his designee.
Do we want a subcommittee, or do we want just the information to be brought back to the committee for further discussion in October? And I just ask because I know that if you're talking about completely rewriting a policy, we get into a habit when we get here where we start looking at A's, N's, D's. And so I'm just, in the interest of time, I don't know if anybody has a real passion for this and wants to do the.
Would the board be amenable to us working on submitting a revision to this policy for the October policy meeting?
Sounds good to me.
I would really rather us as a board discuss some of this more than just get a proposal from you.
All right. Mr. Pennings?
I'll serve on any committee you want to make. All I'm saying is the policy as it's written here, in my humble opinion, is no good. Period.
All right. So it sounds like Mr. Pennings and Mr. Moore are volunteering to look at this policy and maybe work with the director and his designee. All right. As a part of that, when we're talking about naming, there was an issue that had come up, and we talked about it. We've talked about it briefly in the past, but there's no policy, and you said you needed direction with regards to plaques. Do you want that also to be considered?
We'll talk about that as a subcommittee and report back at the October meeting,
All right.
if that's okay with you, Madam Chairman.
That is. I just want that to
Excellent.
be considered as well.
Thank you.
All right. You volunteered. All right, moving on. The next section is for our memorandum of understanding recommendations, and Mr. Moore, Mr. Pennings, I think Mr. Beaver also all served on the committee that worked with the collaborative conferencing that brought us a memorandum of understanding. They did a lot of really good work, and there was a request that was made to put some of those recommendations into policy, and Ms. Alexander has drafted those changes that occurred to the old MOU, so I will turn the floor over to her to explain those changes.
The first one, 2.802, payroll procedures, we have moved everyone except for food service and transportation employees to 24 paychecks. That language has been added in this policy to reflect that, and that is something that we did agree upon in the MOU.
Well, that is also something that the teachers, I believe, and the staff brought to Dr. Marzak, that what they would like to have done.
Right, we did a survey and about 600 teachers voted, well, all staff together voted for 24 months. About a third of them voted for 10 months, to stay on 10 months. So the majority wanted to move to a 24 paycheck schedule. We did add Martin Luther King Jr. Day. That is something that Dr. Marzak wanted. We had not had Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a holiday in the past, so this just adds that holiday as one of the holidays for employees.
We'll move on to policy 5.311, bereavement.
This is a new policy. This is the language that we voted on for the MOU. We did not have a bereavement policy. We did have a bereavement procedure type in both handbooks, and with the handbook for teachers being gone and the MOU replacing that, it basically said that you would get 3 days off per year. We decided to change that to 3 days off per event. We had a lot of employees that would have 2 relatives that qualified under bereavement pass away, and if they weren't in different years, they only got bereavement pay for one of those relatives. So we changed this to be per event, and this is the language that the committee decided on.
Mr. Pennings?
I know we discussed it in our meetings, Ms. Amanda, but I would like a little more clarification on line 2, full-time employee upon documentation from the employee. I think we have to clarify documentation, because I don't want somebody to come with documentation saying, well, I have the obituary, that's documentation, or I have a in-memory card from the funeral home, that should be documentation. All of the funeral homes, as I understand it, now have forms that you can ask for. They put your name on it and they sign it that you were at the funeral home or attended the funeral. That's what I'd like to see this policy reflect.
And we can make make the administrators aware of that at the schools. They are the ones that will be approving the bereavement pay, and the documentation will be coming to them. So we can make that aware that we want these specific types of documentation.
Any other questions on this policy? Mr. Bates?
If we adopt this policy, is there any sort of effect from a financial standpoint to the school system?
That's hard to say because we don't know who's going to apply for bereavement or not. I don't see, right now they can just take the 3 days per year. From a budget standpoint, I mean, we don't know who's going to apply for it, so you don't know whose family member's going to pass away. So it's kind of hard. It would be if someone had 2 family members that would normally just have 1 family member pass away within that year. But I think it's going to be a nominal effect on the budget.
Okay. And so that's just what I wanted to see, whether, I guess, if we did think there was going to be some budget standpoint, have we looked at that from a budgetary standpoint, just make sure
We
in our
have.
existing budgets that we're okay?
Dr. Perkins and I discussed that, and there is some extra monies for benefits type if we were to go over that budget line.
Okay. But our best estimate right now is if we pass this policy, the effect on us from a budgetary standpoint would be nominal.
Yes.
Mr. Pennings?
Well, we have to see where it goes this year, but just limiting any individual to 1 occurrence a year, I didn't even know that was in the policy, and I think it's ridiculous. I mean, you have a son or a daughter die, you take off. So now you have a sister or somebody die, I can't get off. To me, as a human being, and being old enough to have gone through most of this experience, this policy makes sense, and it's how we should feel about our employees and the way we should treat our employees.
Mr. Moore?
I just want to clarify one thing and make sure I didn't misunderstand this. At no point were we telling someone they could not take off. I think the difference here is procedurally is that we're not making them take personal time on this. So I just want to be clear. At no point was anybody saying you had someone pass away and you can't leave. This is just and I think that's where it gets to Mr. Bates' point. We're transitioning from them taking any personal accrued time to now the school system is actually just covering that. So just want to be perfectly clear on that.
Any other discussion? All right, we'll move on to policy 5.302, sick leave.
The next 3 policies, 5.302, 04, and 05, those were all concerning leaves, and they involved maternity leave, and we also added paternity. So everywhere you see maternity leave, you also will see /paternity, because it's now, folks are eligible for paternity leave as well.
Any questions on those? All right, we'll move on to the next one, I think policy 5.602.
5.602, there's added language to that policy, and it concerns teachers that have to cover for a substitute teacher. A lot of times a substitute may be called, may not show up, and so teachers are taking their planning time to cover that. This gives that teacher or teachers the same pay as a substitute would make for covering that class during their planning times. And this is in addition to their regular salary.
Right, this is another thing that Dr. Mazark brought up, which is actually fairness to the teacher. I mean, this was their planning period, and you were supposed to have a substitute teacher, and the substitute teacher didn't show up. So
Or-
now you'd say to this teacher, well, you can't have your planning period, you have to go cover this class.
Or at the elementary level, you'll have 2 teachers split that class in half and take half the class. So now we're going to compensate those 2 teachers, half sub pay each for what the sub would have gotten that day for taking on that extra load of students for that day.
This is just compensating the employees fairly is all it's doing.
Agreed.
Mr. Bates?
And so from a budgetary standpoint, I guess we were going to incur the cost of a substitute teacher anyway. So we would actually then not have to pay that that amount, but we may have to pay some additional amount because the teacher's salary may be more than what the substitute teacher's salary may have been.
No, they were going to get what the sub was going to get paid that day, split either in half or split her in thirds, or for whatever period that they covered for that section.
Okay, so they would only receive the substitute teacher rate.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the impact would be, it's zero impact.
Ms. Martin?
Which is already low.
Actually,
We're actually one of the highest in all the surrounding counties for substitute teacher pay.
some of the members of the South Central Superintendent, we started doing a roundtable discussion online about sub pay. We're one of the highest in southern Middle Tennessee.
I didn't say a comparison to other counties, just saying in general, just in general.
It could
Because
always
we
be
had a
higher.
discussion
It could
about
always be
wanting to
higher.
recruit the retired teachers to come in, and so therefore we would have to have a competitive rate.
We got
So I'm
something
just
for you.
making a
We got something.
generalized statement.
Dr. Hargrove?
We have raised that to $80 if you hold a teacher's license.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
And the other superintendents around are like, Marzak, you're killing us, because it's good.
I just, as a former teacher, I think it's a great benefit. I can't tell you how upsetting it is when a teacher gets something in their box to cover a class that's way on the end of if you're at Central High School and you have things that you need to load in your kiln or whatever you're going to do and be prepared. And I think teachers are going to be very pleased that as employers that we value their time. And I think that's important. And I do also commend you for, I have long, for years, said certificated retired teachers. Wouldn't you rather have somebody in the classroom in an elementary school that's been there? And so I really think that's a great, I appreciate that.
And to be honest with you, thank you. To be honest with you, this was kind of standard practice in Nashville, even when I was a teacher 15 years ago. So the fact that we're doing it now, it just makes sense. So.
I would just like to publicly thank Miss Amanda. I mean, we were just sitting there discussing and everything, and she'd be discussing, and when she'd come out with the minutes, you could have sneezed and it would have been on the minutes. Thank you, Miss Amanda.
Motion to approve all items under section C. Just real quick, I will say, when we went over most of these in discussion, we spent a couple of days talking about these things. I think this was some really good work we put into this, and I think there were some really good things that we're doing here that were not previously covered. And again, Ms. Amanda definitely filled in some gaps. I think that our employees were not getting probably what they should get. So I'm happy to see these. Thank you.
I'm just waiting to hit tweet. It's waiting.
Our next section is discussion of policy manual review. As y'all know, for the last 2 years, we have painstakingly been trying to go through our policy manual, and we've made a lot of progress. However, last year, we did commit to a subscription service with TSBA, where we get to use their expertise to inform our policy manual, and that's why we've been getting a lot of our recommendations from. But we also have where they have reviewed our old policy manual and made recommendations based off all the work that we've been doing for the last at least 2 years on it. I met with Amanda, and we kind of talked about each of the sections and who from central office might have a say in those particular sections. And so I think she's met with or at least talked to them about the possibility of looking at these specific sections. However, policy is something that is obviously comes from the board. So I think it would be helpful if we had some volunteers that maybe wanted to work with these people, these members at central office on specific sections. You don't have to make commitment. I won't ask people to make commitments right now, but if you want to email whoever the next policy chairman is, and let them know, what sections you might want to look at. Again, it's going to be a pretty arduous task, and so I don't think it's something that is going to necessarily lend itself to having us all discuss it, at one of these meetings, unless we want to have a retreat. And even then, we probably wouldn't get it done. So I'll just leave that open-ended, but you can see kind of who would be looking at various sections. And so I think if you have a specific interest, then you might want to try to work with those individuals at central office. Do you have anything to add?
One thing that we did do, I took anything that was legally, that we had to have legally, I have taken that out. Any policies that TSB recommended that we delete, we have taken those out. And what you will get when you start working on these policies is a packet that has our current policy side by side with the TSBA policy recommendation. So the committees can sit down and look at those side by side and see which one they prefer, if they want to combine them or change the language or however they want to do. So a lot of policies we've taken out just because we had to, but you will have both versions side by side to compare when you start doing your review.
And all of the TSBA recommendations are on SharePoint, so you have access to them. But if you're like me, when you're trying to look at what TSBA recommended, you don't necessarily have what we have currently in place. So it's going to be very helpful to have those two items printed out so that you can refer to, because obviously the devil's in the details. Mr. Bates?
I was just going to say, I think this is a great idea and a great process that you and Ms. Hargrove have done. And I think it's good to get the input from the people on the front lines that are actually living with these policies from day to day, who are going to have much better insight as to what's working, what's not working, and can review these TSBA model policies. So I like the process. I think at the end of the day, I guess the process would be after these kind of subcommittees review these things, ultimately it's still going to come back to the board for final approval. And so I think that's good. And I also think it's a good idea that if we could have some board volunteers to be willing to kind of volunteer for some of these, that would be helpful too, if when we get to that stage, because we don't want to be, we could take forever of trying to get through all these policies. Yes, but it would be good to have a board member that, if did have opportunity to sit in on some of those, could kind of give some insight and, to the board members, so that. But I think it would make our lives a lot easier going through this process.
Sounds good. All right. If there's no further discussion on that, just feel free to reach out as you want to participate on that particular process. The last item is the consideration of the ACT resolution. Dr. Marzak, do you want to speak on that?
Yes, so this is a continuation of where we left off last legislative session, where you authorized me to go speak before the Senate Education Committee to allow Murray County Schools to be one of the school districts that was allowed to use either the ACT or the SAT suite of assessments. That conversation has been ongoing with the Department of Education. We find that there's very little leeway with anything except the ACT. And considering that TN is not ready, we feel that that's unacceptable. The ACT has a great metric of assessments that go all the way down to third grade. And I've been talking to our local legislative representatives, Representative Butt and Representative Hensley, and they challenged me to come back to the General Assembly and testify again before the Senate Ed Committee. Because from what I'm understanding, there's starting to become a lack of confidence with the Department of Education to get us back up and running with online assessments anytime soon. So I think if we ever have a good time to do it, this is the time to do it. Because last spring was not very good for the state of Tennessee and the Department of Education.
Mr. Moore?
I was going to say at the TSBA regional meeting that we had earlier this week, I know there was some discussion there, and there was some definite skepticism by several members of board members as well as superintendents that we may end up right back where we were last year on this. So in light of that, I would definitely make a motion that we approve the the new resolution with the language that mirrors what some of the other counties are doing, and get on board with that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed? All right, that resolution passes.
Mr. Wolliver, if you don't mind, I'm going to send the resolution to you. Could you format it into legal format? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, and we have exhausted our agenda. All those in favor of adjourning say aye. Aye. All those opposed? We'll be adjourned. Thank you.
Okay. I think it's my turn next for the zoning and facilities. I tell you what, let's come back as per that clock right there. We'll be at 5 after. We'll start back.